Jessica Smith of Aragon, and Nneoma Kanu of Stable Lab. Not in order. I tried to get it in order. Please excuse me for having my phone out. I tried writing down questions, then the pages, it just got very disorganized. So first off, I think we're going to start with a very simple question that I have for all of you, and then we can get into more of a conversation, I hope. But in addition to telling me maybe briefly what you do, what your organization does, we're going to start down the line with Ben. Maybe you can tell me your definition, as brief as you can make it, of what a DAO actually is, a decentralized autonomous organization. What is that?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Ben DiFrancesco. I work at Scopelift. We're a dev agency that's primarily focused on governance engineering, so building the software and tools that enable DAO governance to function. I think really fundamentally what a DAO is it's, for lack of a better word, a competitor to traditional company formation. So it's a way to have digitally native, internet native firms and organizations that are basically where the jurisdiction is on chain, so to speak. And I think that enables a whole bunch of new kinds of stuff, and we're just the very early stages of scratching the surface of what that looks like, and that's why I'm personally excited about DAOs.
Awesome. Jessica?
So riffing off this, what is
Sure.
a DAO? So we have, I think the definition we're working with, which is maybe simplistic, is that a DAO is an organization, so a group of agents that are coordinating to achieve some kind of goal that is facilitated by smart contracts on a public blockchain. And so essentially, I think if you want to make it a little bit more pragmatic, it's you need to have some kind of asset that you're governing on chain, whether that's a protocol, smart contracts, tokens, et cetera. And you need to have membership on chain. So either you're holding a token, you're a token holder, or you're whitelisting addresses. And then your membership makes proposals to do certain actions with those assets. And that's kind of a breakdown. And you hopefully want to do that in a way where you're preserving or protecting the values of the public blockchain that you're building on. So that's where the decentralization comes in, the trustlessness comes in, the transparency, the verifiability of transactions, et cetera. We're building these organizations on a blockchain like Ethereum for a reason. So I think DAOs are a way to extend those properties and extend the value of the chain you're building on.
Thank you so much. I'm Nneoma. I'm from Stable Lab. We are a governance firm. We do everything from service provisioning, framework design. We also run a couple nodes across different networks, which allows us to have good stake in the governance that we participate in. My definition of what a DAO is, they're internet communities with very large treasuries and lots of drama. I'm just kidding. But they are actually blockchain-enabled tools for social coordination is, I think, the most simple definition I can give. And it's extremely layered, of course, as we can see, and of course, as my fellow panelists expanded upon.
Hey guys, I'm Tekin Salimi. I'm the founder of a fund called DAO5. We've been around for about 2 years. We're a little bit unique in that we're actually just a traditional venture fund right now. There's nothing that's DAO-like about us. But in the future, we plan to convert the general partner entity, the actual investment manager of the funds, into a DAO. What that means, I don't exactly know yet, but the main principle is that governance and financial stakes will be given to all the portfolio founders of our fund. In terms of the question, what is a DAO? It's an interesting question because you ask 5 people, you can get like 6 different answers. But to me, I subscribe to a broader idea of what a DAO can be. And that's mostly any set of stakeholders that are unified by a token, which has governance as a main feature of the token. So a DAO could do one thing very specifically today, but the governance should be robust enough that stakeholders can vote and change the mandate of what the DAO does, change the mandate of what the token is and like the economics of it. We're still in the early days of this, so it's going to be a fun problem to ideate on in the future.
Awesome. Maybe to kind of switch gears a little bit, Nneoma, we were talking backstage about DAO tooling. You work a lot with DAO tooling as a contributor to a lot of protocols. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the state of those tools, and maybe if you can try to help our audience understand what these tools are that I'm talking about.
Of course. I can speak from a delegate perspective. So I contribute to a couple Ethereum DAOs, Lido DAO, Liquid Staking. I also contribute to SafeDAO and StarkNet. And I think the state of DAO tooling is very robust, but unfortunately there isn't quite enough connectivity across these tools. We have Snapshot, of course, which is like core infrastructure of the network, allows token holders to participate in decision making in each of these DAOs. I like to think about Snapshot as like a small tool that's like an add-on to what is already happening in different DAOs. And then we have on-chain governance modules like Aragon, for example, which I participate with on Lido DAO. And then we have Tally, which probably is my favorite like on-chain turnkey solution for managing DAOs, where you can do everything from setting up the DAO to distributing tokens, getting delegates in there, managing the treasury as well. And yeah, I think the state of DAO tooling currently serves what governance is right now, but I like to think a lot about the future-proof like governance, and thinking about governance experiments. And I tend to think that what we currently have still has quite a bit of a way to go in the way that it serves different forms of contributors, people with various sort of like tolerance for governance, different altitudes of decision making within the DAOs. Of course, DAOs are not monolithic, and I think that the tools that we use should be able to reflect like the sort of like vastness in what we could really do with DAOs. And that's just like a simple snapshot, but there's so much more happening in the realm of DAO tooling that I think we can all speak to.
And Francesco, you work with build tools. I wonder, feel free to chime in throughout this whole thing. I wonder if either of you have thoughts on kind of where things can go and where things are.
Yeah, we were just chatting about this actually walking up on stage. From Aragon's perspective, Aragon was deployed the first DAO framework in 2017. And DAOs have evolved a lot since then. I think we've learned a lot as an industry since. And I feel in terms of the current state of DAO tooling, one of the challenges that we have, or the kind of corner we need to turn, is bringing more customization and granularity to what a DAO can do, particularly on-chain. So making it easier for DAOs, for different kinds of DAOs, managing different kinds of assets, like protocols, smart contracts, different types of treasuries, to be able to have governance models that meet their unique needs a lot better. So we re-architected our tech stack and actually launched a new tech stack last year, this time at ETHDenver. Our protocol, the new version of our protocol is called Aragon OSX. And what that enables DAOs to do is to build custom plugins. So basically, you have a vault that holds whatever asset you're governing, and then the governance logic of your DAO lives in a plugin. So this makes it easier for DAOs to customize their governance models. But not only that, where the power truly is in that, what we hope to see next is that protocols and projects come up with these custom or unique governance models, things like dual governance, multi-body governance, cross-chain governance, and create these new models that then other DAOs can easily replicate. So they'll be easily able to grab that open source plugin, plug it into their DAO, and even change their governance model over time. So you can stay in your DAO, you can use your current governance model and upgrade to a new one. So you're seeing, oh, this project's doing something interesting, I want to use that plugin, and just making that process easier, where growing these network effects in this ecosystem, we can all benefit from what we're learning. But Ben can talk, I'm sure, a lot more on like the customization work that this entails, and it is a heavy lift.
Yeah, so I totally agree that I think a modular or extensible plug-in-based architecture is definitely the direction that we want to be moving in. I think when you think of, I think one of the challenges that we've seen with DAOs is there was this kind of initial wave of excitement about them, and a lot of DAOs launched, and the clock speed of innovation has been a little slower than I would like to see, because I think what happens is the DAOs get a little conservative once they're live and on chain, right? Once these contracts are managing, in some cases, billions of dollars worth of assets, managing the protocol, which can have billions of dollars worth of assets locked in it, they're hesitant to change these core contracts, because if they make a mistake, then there could be loss of funds or worse that comes along with that, right? So, but what that does is it slows down the pace of innovation. So now we only get new experiments when new DAOs launch or when a DAO is sort of brave enough, so to speak, to go through the process of a big upgrade of their governance contracts. And so I think having a more extensible, plug-in, modular-based approach is going to allow the clock speed to move a lot faster. And so we're working more in the governor ecosystem, but trying to extend and expand the surface area of the governor contracts to enable that same sort of model. I think another aspect beyond just like the plug-in kind of aspect or the module-based system is also the permissionless aspect of it is really important, right? So wherever a DAO can give its members, give like the broad public the ability to create things that plug into the DAO in some way without compromising the core security of the DAO itself, that is really powerful in and of itself. Because now that experimentation, like people can just try things out, and that allows things to move a lot faster. So that's the architecture that we're trying to push the ecosystem toward as well, not because we think we have an exact idea of where DAOs should go, but because we want to enable the experimentation that will allow us to figure that out over time.
So for the remainder of the panel, we've got like 18 minutes left. I think we've had a good overview of what a DAO is, kind of what the state of tooling is, if that's a correct grammatical, construction. Tekin, I want to talk about what you're thinking about with regards to what powers should token holders have in this sort of a system that you're ideating. You said that a DAO is just token holders, having control over a system.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I will say, I'll caveat everything I'm about to say with the fact that we're very early in figuring out what our token model is going to look like, what type of DAO DAO 5 will ultimately be. But I think some of our inspirations were largely, for instance, Nouns DAO, where the governance tokens themselves were NFTs. There's this like automated auction every 24 hours. There isn't a sense that you're just pouring money into this black pit or this team against you that is raising money by selling these, but rather every dollar that's contributed to this system forms a treasury that goes into investing, and theoretically the value of that just attributes back to the NFT holders. That's a big inspiration. And the other common thread that I'm trying to establish before converting into a DAO is just kind of a shared culture. I think culture is one of the important underlying elements or like the foundational pieces that keep people engaged and feel like everyone's on the same team ultimately by owning tokens. We've seen a lot of instances in the early DAO experiments where you kind of have this dynamic of retail versus whales, and there's this like negative sentiment by individual holders against the big VCs that own a lot of the governance tokens or the founding team. There's this like sentiment that their voice and governance doesn't matter. But I think theoretically, if you can just align people with a common set of goals and a common values, you solve a lot of those problems over time. Bit of a vague answer, but those are some of the things we're thinking about.
I mean, so again, to get a little more specific too, Nneoma, I know you've all done some work. I at least know with like, I feel like with Uniswap, you had done some things around, I don't know if it was you personally, but you kind of spearheaded a proposal to make it so that smaller delegates had more power within the voting system. Can you talk about what motivated that and how, did it work, and how can you move that to other DAOs, that kind of a model?
Right, absolutely. I think one issue across like all DAOs and all governance systems, not just like DAOs in general, is participation. And that is like something that has emerged as one of the pain points in decentralized autonomous organizations. And I think delegation came up as one of the more viable solutions. So delegation is like a form of liquid democracy where token holders are able to delegate voting power to people who might be better equipped, have more time to participate in governance. And we're always looking for ways to make delegation more effective, less sticky, and just like welcome new perspectives and new contributors into governance. With the Uniswap proposal specifically, which is still sort of like in the it's past the temp check phase, and it's good to see that the community is supportive of that motion. We really wanted to make sure that there was enough voting power for underrepresented delegates who have expressed the will to participate in Uniswap governance to have that power to like influence decisions. More specifically, I work in the Lido DAO. Lido is like core infrastructure on the Ethereum network, and we see that a lot of on-chain motions fail in Lido because they just don't hit quorum. And that's like a symptom, of course, of low participation. And so this idea came that why don't we move the Lido governance module to a whole other platform, my personal favorite, sorry for the bias, Tally, and it turned out that token holders just did not have appetite for that type of migration. And so we had to work with the current Lido governance module, which is situated on a very old version of Aragon. And unfortunately, the Lido token does not have governance interfaces. So we're currently in this space where we are exploring a few different workarounds with the compound Governor Bravo contract and the token manager to see how we can enable on-chain delegation, just to inspire more participation and make sure that we're able to, Ben said, innovate more rapidly, take on more governance experiments. Lido is thinking about dual governance, which essentially would allow stake holders veto on-chain motions. And I would really love to see examples like that taken and applied across different DAOs to just help them innovate a bit faster, move forward a bit faster, and of course, meet the needs of the community in a more sustainable way.
If I can jump in here quick, yes, Lido is governed with Aragon smart contracts, an earlier version of Aragon OS. And what you're speaking to is precisely the problem that we've been working on solving in this re-architecture. And what Ben was mentioning, when you're governing that amount of assets, you can end up getting locked into your governance models, and things change fast and things move fast. So we saw this problem with these DAOs that have been deployed on Aragon and on this infrastructure that might need to evolve their governance over time. And we were quite close with the team at Lido as well, and Lido's pushing some ideas in terms of optimistic dual governance, for instance, which inspired us building this plugin to bring these new governance models to life, because it is important for these DAOs and even the DAOs that have very high security needs to be able to evolve their governance over time. So that is, the problem statement, basically, and the challenge that we've focused on solving with this new architecture of our tech stack.
Maybe, Ben, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to jump in and say, adding on to what Nneoma was discussing in terms of, delegation of, token voting weight is aimed at solving this problem of, should every single token holder be kind of voting on, and, do they have the expertise and the knowledge and the time to be intimately involved with every detailed decision that the DAO needs to make? And so delegation helps address that problem. I think professionalizing delegation in the way that you guys are, Nneoma, also helps to do that. But then I think there's a further question of do delegates need to be voting on every intricate, detailed decision as well? And so I think one of the things we're starting to see emerge is this idea of kind of roles and permissions within the DAO enforced on-chain with smart contracts, where you can delegate different, not just voting weight, but delegate responsibilities to different entities. And those entities can kind of serve as the principal agent, aimed at, solving a specific problem, managing a specific resource on chain, but ultimately their privileges roll back up to the delegates and the token holders. And so the delegates can serve more as almost like a board of directors style role, where their responsibility is sort of making sure that the various entities that have been given the privileges within the system are doing their job and evaluating if it's being executed on well, and if it's not, then those responsibilities can be revoked and transferred onto another entity. And so that's a very basic, kind of thing within companies, say, for example, having hierarchical responsibilities and roles. But it's something that we're just starting to figure out in the kind of DAO on-chain context. And so that's where I think we're in the early innings. The iteration needs to occur, but the tooling is getting better really fast for solving problems like this.
So, Jessica, I know Aragon, has its own DAO, and you've had your own experiments, with token-based governance. And there was this controversy last year where, token holders voted to enable redemption, so that you had this over $100 million worth of, cryptocurrency in a treasury. Token holders voted to, make redemptions possible so they could get a share of that treasury. And then the Aragon, association, the team itself, eventually, after 12 months of not allowing redemptions, made the central decision to allow a part of the treasury to be redeemed, but not the remainder of the treasury. And there remains a bunch of controversy around the unredeemed token. So there's still tokens sitting here that people have not redeemed themselves, over $50 million worth at my last checking. And people are concerned that Aragon might take those tokens for themselves, for the team. And I'm curious, first off, like, what are you going to do about those tokens? And then we can talk about what this means from a governance standpoint.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to lay the facts a little bit, or the facts set to give folks more context. But Aragon had an ICO in 2017 and raised $20 million in ETH at the time in order to advance this mission, in order to build DAO tooling. And over time, there were a lot of changes in the Aragon project, turnover in the team, changes in the technology, advancing different products, et cetera. And Aragon building DAO tooling was always committed to moving, into a DAO. So there were a lot of different experiments that happened over time. For instance, Aragon launched the first grant program after Ethereum. Then there were different kind of ways to decentralize the teams, decentralize the contributions, had a community DAO that was kind of optimistic based, and then token holders voted to move in the full treasury and the full project into a delegate-based voting DAO. And what happened at that time is that the incentives of token holders that, for a token that was launched more than 5 years prior hadn't really followed the ecosystem due to all the changes that happened over time, changes in product, changes in the teams, changes in the culture. So those interests and those incentives are very hard to align. And essentially different groups that had the token had different agendas and incentives. So when the treasury started getting moved on chain, there's a certain group of token holders who bought up the Aragon token that were advocating for certain financial measures to be taken in order to
they were like activist investors, risk-free value,
like,
the RFV raters.
Exactly. And what happens when you're in a DAO and you have a legal wrapper, for instance, and that you're in a jurisdiction, that's pros and cons. That's a whole other panel in and of itself, or multiple ones. But your hands are a little tied in terms of what you can.
So you're saying it would have been impossible for you to open up redemption. So basically, the token holders voted to open up redemptions for this full treasury, and it was regulatory reasons that you had to reserve some of that treasury for yourselves?
No, sorry. So token holders voted to move into a delegate DAO, then token holders bought up tokens to advocate for different measures. There's a range of measures, like buybacks, liquidating the entire treasury, this kind of thing. So there was, token holders were just kind of advocating in the forum, et cetera. Is the Aragon Association that decided, in order to resolve this kind of underlying tension and conflict that had been in the project, it's the association that decided to do the redemption initiative. So the redemption initiative was a proactive initiative to return the majority of the treasury to token holders for a redemption period of 1 year. And that was done in a way that also enables the mission of the project to continue.
So who makes that decision is the real question. Like in a DAO, sorry to single you out, but I think this is really interesting. Like, you mentioned the association did decide to keep some of that currency, and there's more than $50 million still outstanding that people haven't redeemed that right now is still kind of sitting there that might, I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm asking you.
No.
But who makes the decision on what to do with those things, if not the token holders that voted to open up redemptions entirely?
Yeah, so the stakeholders of the association that were in the association made the decision to move this treasury into the redemption contract.
And who are the stakeholders of the association?
Like the board of the association.
And so I guess the question becomes, what is a DAO? Like, is a DAO the association? Is a DAO token holders? Because we were talking about, again, like this seems aggressive, but it is like, this is at the core of many DAOs.
It's, it's a hard question because, people, do you want a legal wrapper? Is a question that's often used like in DAOs, do you have a legal wrapper? And having a legal wrapper of a nonprofit association that's based in a country, which is Switzerland, you do have certain obligations. So an association has a mission and has a purpose, and the board of that association is bound to that mission or bound to that purpose. So you can't do, whatever you want. And it's a really great tension, and that you raise, this tension that comes up with the interests of stakeholders or token holders and the legal obligations you might have, having these kinds of legal entities. That's the solution that this association came to, was to send the majority of the treasury, as much as could be sent to the redemption contract, at the end of the 1 year period to clarify this association has dissolved. All of the legacy stakeholders have removed themselves from the project, sent the treasury.
Well, some of them have kept their money in because they want to wait and see how the rest of this is resolved, how the rest of the treasury is dealt with. And there are some folks who, we don't know what's going on with their tokens, but they've just kept them there because they're from, they might be lost, they might be, have used like a legacy version of the,
Absolutely. So we're doing everything that we can, and the project is doing everything that we can for token holders to be aware that this redemption period is over. But essentially, it's a new board of stakeholders that will be industry stakeholders that need this technology to work, that are building on Aragon, have built on Aragon. That's the stakeholders. Projects like Lido that should have a voice about how the direction of the infrastructure and where it should go. So it's going to be a new board of stakeholders that are external to the project that's going to be set up, and that board will decide how to advance the mission with the funds that will potentially remain at the end of the redemption
you can't tell us what's
contract.
going to happen, and I'm sorry, we're going to move past this, but you can't tell us what's going to happen with those, more than $50 million in that treasury.
No, I can't tell you, and none of the Aragon core teams, like none of my team, one either had significant voting power or token power in this, and none of us were either part of the association. We were just heads down building, and we were committed to shipping this tech stack and building Aragon OS X and moving it forward. And we also will not be, the redemption contract, or what is left, is not coming to this team. This team's building this tech stack. It will be a new board of external stakeholder that will decide how the mission continues. And if it's with this tech stack, the mission is to advance DAO technology and DAO tooling. And Aragon has done this since 2017. And yes, it's had ups and downs. And yes, it's had a full turnover in the team. It's had a full turnover in the tech stack and a full turnover in the structure. But this is hard. Figuring out DAO governance and the governance of projects is hard, and we're just going to take the next best step in terms of making the project as resilient as we can and continuing to build this infrastructure.
Dana, you were about to chime in.
I mean, zooming out from the specifics of the Aragon situation, if I could, I think what you're bringing up is one of the big open questions around DAOs, and maybe even crypto more broadly, which is as I alluded to earlier, one of the reasons to prefer or like a DAO is that your jurisdiction, in a sense, kind of moves on chain. But of course, people that participate in these DAOs still live in various different legal jurisdictions, have the laws of those jurisdictions that they have to follow. If you have other legal entities that are related to or involved in the DAO, members of those entities have fiduciary responsibilities and other things that they have to follow. And so what does the interface look like between the rules that are encoded in smart contracts on chain and these various legal and social rules that we have in the real world? And that's a huge unresolved tension in DAOs and really the whole crypto space. Again, a whole different panel that we could have a very long conversation on, but I think it's really interesting and one of the things that very much has to be figured out over time.
So who ultimately should decide, this is for maybe Nneoma or Tekin, should decide how much stakeholders in a DAO are compensated? That's a big question. I mean, some of our sponsors here are dealing with that question. Is it a team? Is it the DAO itself? Should they vote on these payroll decisions, which is a hard thing to do day to day? How do you make those decisions?
I will say incentives and balancing incentives is an existential problem in DAOs. To an extent, I think with early DAOs and sort of the notion of progressive decentralization, it's easy to sort of impose these incentive structures without much community input. But I think as a DAO grows and scales and there are more participants and contributors with context, we can actually decentralize the decision making around how much contributors should be paid, how they should be incentivized, whether it should be monetary rewards or reputational rewards and things like that. And I'm happy that that is actually something that we are progressing through in DAO governance. Of course, we have shining examples with MakerDAO and their delegation system and delegate incentives, and less shining examples. But I think in all, I think the ideal version of this would be for the DAO itself, the community, and everyone would stake to be able to decide how much people get incentivized and what that actually looks like.
We got 24 seconds. Tekin, any thoughts on this?
You've said most of it, but I'll just add, I agree that I think token holders should ultimately vote on economic decisions of those tokens. We saw this a lot in DeFi 1.0, the launch of Compound. For a long time, there were no economics attributing to those tokens, but you eventually, when you feel comfortable with how decentralized the network is, that there's some, that governance decisions actually accurately represent the wants and needs of token holders, you vote to turn on economics. We also saw this recently with Uniswap. I believe in that model most fundamentally.
All right, thank you, Tekin. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I think we had a fun, spicy panel. I hope you all enjoyed and are glad you stuck around. And yeah, thanks. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, you guys. That was really great. You know, it gave some insight into what